With the way things are going, you could very well be next. Now, you might have caught my video yesterday and a few videos about a month ago about this case here. This is my pro bono case where, in a nutshell, the police came to the door to seize a girl's phone for what the mother originally believed to have been in relation to her daughter viewing a social media post. Now, there was a lot more to it than that, which I won't go into in this video, but I did help them out pro bono. They've now got the phone back. There's a lot more to it. You can watch my previous video for that. But it's not just this case here. There are countless different examples, such as this one here, where the police have turned up, questioned people, and even arrested people for various different offences, alleged offences, which I'll show you these cases in a minute. And there's a very interesting and very important point that a lot of people have brought up, which I'm going to talk to you about and warn you about in this video. First of all, we are here on Black Belt Secrets. Please do subscribe. Lots of you are subscribing. I really appreciate that. A few of you are also frustrated because YouTube has unsubscribed you without any action on your part, which is really frustrating, but we are in communication with YouTube to try to resolve that. So please do subscribe. Nonetheless, help to combat that little thing. Do check that you are still subscribed, and I'd be really grateful. So let's take a look at one or two of these examples, and I'm going to come back to the law on what they say in some of these cases in the second half of the video. But first of all, let's just take a brief listen to one or two of these. Listen to this.
Someone has been caused, obviously, anxiety based upon your social media post. That's the reason why you've been arrested.
So the officer says someone has been caused anxiety because of one of your social media posts. That's why you're being arrested. All a bit bizarre, you might think, but that's not the only example. There's lots more examples of it like this one here. Listen to this.
Basically, our hate crime team reviewed it and said there are offences there we need to explore.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the time is 21:31 around arrest for what's referred to as Section 19.
Section 19?
I'll explain it in a second. You don't have to say anything, but how many defence if you don't mention one question, something which will later on in court. Anything you do say, maybe get evidence. Basically, the Section 19 refers to spreading what we say like racial hatred. So you've posted something online that we believe is spreading racial hatred.
Twitter, Facebook, what?
So the officer says he's been posting something online which is, quote, spreading racial hatred. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't agree with spreading racial hatred, any hatred of any sort. But how it's being applied is very much in question. But it all leads to one really dangerous point, which I will come to in just a moment. But here's yet another example.
The time's 20 to 3, 14:40. I'm arresting you on suspicion of improper use of the electronic communications network. I'm just 127 of the Communications Act, okay? So you do not have to say that it may harm your defence if you don't mention one question, something which later on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand that?
So I'm actually being arrested?
You're going to be arrested, okay?
Right.
So you go to the police station.
Right.
You, okay, this is in relation to some comments that you've made on a Facebook page. Okay?
Oh, really? Oh, it's a Facebook crime, is it?
Okay.
Right.
So again, in relation to comments made on a Facebook post. Now, again, I'm not encouraging anybody to post hateful or hurtful or whatever comments or spreading hatred of any kind, but these sort of things are increasingly prevalent. Here's another one.
If they think that they're quite safe and they can just sit at home and maybe just knock out a little tweet that, you know, they think is a bit edgy or whatever, you know, just be aware of the climate out there at the moment. And, you know, it could be a knock on your door.
And I'm going to pick up on that point there. It could be a knock on your door, because if you make use of X or Twitter, if you insist, or Facebook or anything else, and you make comments, you leave comments, you post things, you post your thoughts, you post your comments, you get into a conversation, you might say things about your employer. One of the examples was where the employer was upset by comments that had been made because it was about what was going on at work and things of that nature. Now, here's a really dangerous point for you, which I really need to drum home here. Now, in this case here, the reason I reference this case of mine once again is they turned up to seize the phone here. Now, of course, every case turns on its own facts, and every case is slightly different, and they're all about slightly different things, and there's slightly different alleged offences in each one, and so on and so forth. they all have one thing in common. And that is that if the police believe that you are perhaps guilty of any kind of offence in relation to any kind of social media post, comment, or sending an email or making any post online, anything of the sort that somebody might be upset by and might have reported and the police get involved in and all these kind of things, regardless of whatever the offence is and the underlying facts, they all have one thing in common. And that is that the police may well, very likely, want to seize your mobile phone. Now, they can do so if they arrest you because they have a general power of seizure if they've arrested you. And even if they haven't arrested you, but they believe there is something that may assist their investigations, they can seize certain things under Section 19 of PACE. If you're at home and the alleged offence is an indictable offence, which means it can be tried in the Magistrates Court or the Crown Court, or it's, of course, indictable only, in which case it's also indictable, then any of those alleged offences, they can enter your property under Section 17 of PACE, using force if necessary, which is a power granted under Section 117 of PACE. Then once in your property and arrested you, they can then seize your phone, any other electronic devices, and that leads to one distinct problem. Aside from the fact that it'll probably take you many, many months to get it returned, it was 1 month to the date, in fact, after I sent a letter pro bono for this lady about this phone, that they got this phone back. 1 month to date. Now, I personally think that was a very quick turnaround. Many reports to me are that it is many, many, many months, if at all, that they get these phones and electronic devices back. Now, many of you may now have gleaned that the problem that I'm coming to here is, what if we are all forced to have digital ID? Now, I'm going to come back to the law in just a moment, but bear with me 2 minutes because this is really important. Now, following on from my videos about digital ID, I cannot stress how dangerous this could possibly be if we do end up with a single ID that links all information that pertains to you. Every bit of personal information that's available, collated together, linked back to you. And if you think about how much of your information is out there on other websites, on other databases, all of which could be gathered together and linked to your personal ID, that is a recipe for disaster, for impersonation, data theft, identity theft, and people taking out loans and such in your name. And that is why I have to emphasize to you that you should use a company that I partner with on my channel here for this very purpose, because my aim was to protect you, and that is Incogni, who specialize in seeking out these websites that host your data, your personal information. It can be anything from your name, your date of birth, where you live, where you went to school, where you work, your children, even your grandchildren, what you shop for. All of these kind of things are stored on databases somewhere, and Incogni specializes in getting them to remove this data using UK and US law. You can even target specific websites if they are problematic and they just simply refuse to remove it, or you absolutely want to ensure that it's done, but you don't know how to do it properly. There are hundreds of them, if not thousands of these different websites, and Incogni will do all of the work for you. You get access to a dashboard and they will show you the progress of these data being removed from their systems. And you need to do it before digital ID kicks in. And as they're a partner to my channel, you get 60% off the service using my code BlackBeltSecrets at the checkout at the link in the description below. You can use multiple email addresses and tell them which specific websites you want to target to remove your data. And of course, you get access to that dashboard. So check it out today. Make sure you use the discount code BlackBeltSecrets for 60% off and start to eliminate yourself from the internet. If they roll it out, they push it out, they insist we have it, they insist it's necessary for work, then if you get a new job and you don't have your phone and it's got your ID on it, how are you going to prove that you can work? How do you prove who you are? Or if you roll it out, if they roll it out to lots of other things, how are you going to prove who you are if you don't have your phone with you? Now, I have a personal example of exactly this, not with digital ID, but I bought a new phone. I love it, by the way. It's the new iPhone 17 Pro Max. It is a very nice phone, but I bought this new phone and I had both phones with me and I was transferring all my apps from one to the other. I used the transfer facility, which is quite seamless, but the one thing that it didn't really fix was the banks getting jumpy because I'd changed my phone. Bearing in mind, I could authenticate myself with the bank. I had both phones in front of me. The bank said, I won't name the bank just yet because I've got an open complaint with them, but the bank said, well, we've frozen the authentication feature for 7 days because you've changed your phone. And I said, well, I have both phones here and you've authenticated me here. I need access to my bank. They said, nuh-uh, you're banned from access for 7 days just because I changed my phone. And that was just because I changed my phone from one to another. And I had both phones with me. The bank locked me out for 7 days. Imagine the trouble and the upset, the frustration and the difficulty you would have if your digital ID was on this phone and the police seized it over a social media post. So coming back to the law, as promised, there are two main offences, and I've got some genuine stories here that the police come to talk to you about when you've been posting things online, posting comments online, even having discussions online, even having discussions by email and these sorts of things. Now, one such offence is under the Communications Act of 2003, and this is under section 127. And I personally think this is far too vague, far too fluffy, and I think it's being abused. Not necessarily intentionally, but it's being abused in the sense that police may not necessarily understand this offence properly and are coming out not just to talk to people about it, but arresting people, seizing their devices, bringing them in, perhaps even charging them over it, and without fully understanding it. And so the offence is written as follows. Improper use of public electronic communications network, which is a bit vague. It's just you're using an electronic communications network, including the internet and everything else, improperly, so much so that it amounts to an offence. Now, there's two here, 1271, 1272. So 1271 says, a person is guilty of an offence if he sends by means of public electronic communications network a message or other matter that is grossly offensive or of an indecent, obscene, or menacing character, or causes any such message or matter to be sent. Now, a grossly offensive message is not just sending someone a message to say, I think you're an expletive, choosing whatever kind of expletive you want in there. Even the most horrendous expletive will probably not usually count. Certainly not as a one-off. I would think that that would not usually count. It would have to be grossly offensive. Now, I've got to jump around the algorithm a little bit here, but if you were to think up the most horrendous, awful, really disturbing content to put in a message and send to somebody, the most horrific that you could possibly imagine, and send it to somebody and target it at them and say, this is what you deserve, or this is you, or this is what I think of you, or whatever. And really, really, really grossly offensive. That is the kind of message that this is intended to apply to. So most, therefore, will not be caught by this section. So if you just sent someone a message and said, I think you're an expletive, that wouldn't usually count. That is certainly not, in my view, that is not what this legislation is designed to encompass. 127 sub 2. A person is guilty of an offence if, for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety to another, he sends by means of public communications a message that he knows to be false, or causes such a message to be sent, or persistently makes use of a public communications network. And therefore, that is, again, to be taken in its literal sense. The person is caused annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety by someone sending a false message or persistent use of that network. Now, again, this will not cover the vast majority of situations. If someone just sends something as a joke, for example, then they know that it's false, and they send it possibly to cause somebody annoyance. That is not what this legislation is intended to cover. If you just send someone like an April Fool's joke and you intend it to be annoying and you know that it's false and you send it to somebody to wind them up, to cause them a little bit of inconvenience and annoyance because it's a joke and it's intended to be a joke, that is not what this legislation is for. The annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety, this is much higher. It is a criminal standard of annoyance and inconvenience. We are talking sending lots of messages or really persistently annoying or some kind of message that is really intended to cause significant inconvenience. So, for example, if somebody were to send, I don't know, somehow they've got, I'm going to make something up, somehow they've got hold of a group email address for a company which has got a lot of employees, let's say hundreds of employees. They pretend to be the boss. They send an email to that address pretending to be the boss saying, I'm sending an email out of hours or from a different address or whatever. All of you are, you're relieved for the week or whatever, and you don't have to come into work. And they make some kind of message like this. This is obviously to cause annoyance and inconvenience to the company. Then if lots of people, say half the people even, take that message as being true, even though the sender knows that it was false, and it causes annoyance and inconvenience, that would probably come under this act. Needless anxiety. This is not just somebody being a little bit annoyed by it. Let's say someone is really, really stressed by what they've seen because they've been told that they've been sacked or something of that nature, and they are caused genuine anxiety. Then again, that is much more likely to come under this act. So you can see here that each of these examples are much more serious than just posting something online that someone's like, I don't like that, I'm offended by that. That is not what this is intended to cover. But I do think that it's being somewhat abused, not intentionally necessarily, but if I'm being less charitable, I think some officers are abusing it. But I think but for the most part, it's not been intentionally abused. It's just being misunderstood, misapplied, and they are using it without full regard to what it really means. And so that is one problem that I have with it. Another problem I have is with the other offense that you heard in one of the example videos is a Section 19 offense. This is Section 19 of the Public Order Act 1986. And so this, I agree with the premise of the offense. I just don't agree that most occasions it should really be properly charged or even investigated as a Section 19 offense. This is where it is the offense of publishing or distributing written material with regard to racial hatred. Now, a person who publishes or distributes written material which is threatening, and again, bearing in mind the proper meaning of the words here, for something to be threatening, it needs to be really seriously threatening, not just someone's a bit annoyed by it. Abusive, again, not just I don't like you, or I don't like your religion, or whatever it is that someone says. That's not abusive by itself. It's not very nice, but it's not necessarily abusive. And again, or insulting. I've always had an issue with the word insulting, which is why it's been changed over the years, but it remains in this. But it does hinge on the racial hatred element. So insulting. So if a person who publishes or distributes material which is insulting, if they intend to stir up racial hatred, or, and the one that I have the problem with, is having regard to all the circumstances that racial hatred is likely to be stirred up. So if a person distributes or publishes material which is insulting or threatening or abusive and intends to stir up racial hatred, or in all the circumstances. Now, this, again, to me, is probably being applied too loosely, because if someone were to make a comment, a statement, let's say, in one of the examples, I believe it pertained to Hamas. Let's say in the example of somebody making a statement about Hamas, which is, as it stands, a proscribed terrorist organization, as far as the UK is concerned. It remains a proscribed group. Let's say if somebody makes a statement, a comment, a post about that group, and then let's say someone else makes a complaint and says that in regard to all the circumstances, it's likely to stir up racial hatred because it's insulting the group, and they say that it's to do with their extremist nature and so on and so forth. If someone were then to take that as being insulting and argue that in all the circumstances that it's likely that racial hatred will be stirred up, you might then get a knock on the door from police, in which case they might seize your phone, and if you've got digital ID on it, it turns your life upside down. These are the problems that I have with these laws and the way that they're applied, because in those situations, it really should not come under this offence here. if someone really did post, which I object to, if somebody posted a really horrible message with regard to, faith and religion and everything else, and they intended it to be insulting and they intended to stir up hatred against that group, which obviously I disagree with, if they did that, then it would likely come under this offence, and that is what this offence is for. My issue is that I think this is being perhaps a little bit misunderstood, a little bit too liberally applied, and thus is curtailing free speech, in my view. But the warning for this video is that when you post these things, you must have these laws in mind, and not just the laws as they are written and as they're supposed to apply, but have in mind that we do see examples that, in my view, this is being applied a little bit too liberally, widely, broadly, loosely, and thus people are being caught up in it when they really perhaps shouldn't. And taking the Lucy Connolly case, now, she said that she felt pushed into pleading guilty because she believed that she would be out of prison a lot sooner or not go to prison at all. But now, doubtless, she regrets that decision. But when she made that original post, she was saying she doesn't care if such a thing happens. Now, under this section here, 19(1)(b), having regard to all the circumstances, which at the time there was civil unrest and riots and everything else going on, having regard to all those circumstances, was it likely that racial hatred was likely to be stirred up? Well, that depends. That would be a question of fact for the jury to find, which is why I maintain that should always go to a jury. But I believe that she feared being remanded into custody. She was twice denied bail. And so these situations, in my view, are really dangerous and really damning. So I urge you to bear these in mind, particularly when it comes to digital ID, using Cogni to help to wipe yourself from the internet, because I think that is absolutely essential. So bear all of this in mind if ever you get a knock on the door. And unless they are coming in to arrest you, my guidance to you is to say, well, if you really want to talk to me, we'll do it at an interview at the police station, under caution, with all of your rights intact, access to PACE codes, free legal advice, and so on. Those are just my thoughts for you in this secrets video. If you enjoy any of that, if you've got any thoughts and comments, leave them below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.